This is the 9-3 video on graphing quadratic equations. I just want to point out a couple things in this picture. This red graph, the blue graph, and the purple graph are all quadratic equations. This green line is considered a linear equation. Everything that we'll be graphing in this section will graph as a quadratic equation, so it will look like one of these parabolas or these U-shaped curves. Make sure you grab your notebook and a pencil and jot down all the notes in this video. There's a lot, and there's a lot to remember. So in your notebook, copy down this entire table. We're going to keep referring back to this table throughout the course of this section. So the first thing you need to know is that the graph of a quadratic equation is going to look like this. A is the coefficient of x squared, B is the coefficient of x, and C is a constant. If A is a value that's positive, the parabola will open up. If A is negative, the parabola is going to open down. Now, two pieces of information that you also need to copy down is that the x coordinate of the vertex is going to be calculated by taking the opposite of B over 2A. That is also the same equation for determining the line of symmetry. Okay, so anytime we have a quadratic equation, we want to put it in standard form. So it needs to look like ax squared plus bx plus c, where again a cannot be 0. In an earlier chapter, we said standard form meant a always had to be positive. That's not true when we're working with quadratics. So when I look at my equation here, y equals negative 3x squared plus 6x plus 2, I need to identify a, b, and c. So a is my coefficient of my x squared term, b is the coefficient of my x term, and c is my constant. So a is negative 3, b is 6, and c is 2. Now what I can determine right now is that a is negative. So because a is negative, that means my parabola is going to open down. The next thing I need to calculate is the x coordinate of my vertex. So to do that, I'm going to calculate the opposite of b, so that's going to be negative 6, over 2a, so 2 times negative 3. When I calculate that, I'll get negative 6 over negative 6, which will simplify to be 1. So I know that the x coordinate of my vertex is 1, and the line of symmetry, or the axis of symmetry, is going to be x equals 1. Okay, in the last slide, we said that the x-coordinate of the vertex was 1. So I just rewrote that up here, right here at the top, so I don't forget. Now, in your notebook, I want you to write down all 3 of these steps for how to graph a quadratic function. We did the first one already. So the first one says, find the x-coordinate of the vertex. So we did that. We know that x is 1. So hopefully you can see in my xy table here, I put in my x-coordinate for my vertex, and I'd like to point out that I put it right in the middle of the table. That's exactly what you need to do. I labeled it. You don't need to label yours, but it's probably not a bad idea to label the first couple, so you remember to put the vertex in the middle. Okay, then we need to find our y-coordinate and make a table of values. So I kind of made the table of values there along with my first step. Now to fill in my x values, I need to go underneath the 1. I need to go 1 above that. So I'm going to go 2, and then now I need to go 1 above 2, or 2 above the 1. So I'm going to go in order. So it should go 1, 2, 3. For my x values that are below 1, I'm going to go in descending order. So I'm going to go 0 here and negative 1 there. So wherever your vertex is, you're going to go 1 above your vertex, and then 2 above. And then you're going to go 1 below and 2 below. And you need to write it in this particular order, putting the vertex in the middle. All right, now that we have the table set up, now we need to go ahead and solve and calculate the y values. So what I'm going to do here is I need to substitute in 1 for x, and then I'm going to solve for my y value. So I'm going to start with the vertex. So my equation is negative 3x squared plus 6x plus 2, and that's going to equal y. So I'm going to substitute in the 1, so I'll get negative 3 times 1 squared plus 6 times 1 plus 2, and that will give me my y value. So negative 3 times 1 squared is 1, plus 6 times 1 is 6, plus 2. So I'll get negative 3 plus 6 plus 2. When I add those all up, I should get y is equal to 5. Now before I get too far ahead of myself, I'm going to put 5 here into my table so I remember that my x value is 1 and my y value is 5, so I don't lose sight of that. Now I need to do this 4 more times. I need to substitute in negative 1 for x, then 0 for x, then 2, and then finally 3. So I'm going to do the exact same procedure that I did here 4 more times. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of room here. I'm going to start with negative 1. So I'm going to go at the top of my table. So 3 times negative 1 squared plus 6x plus, oh, I'm sorry, that should be 6 times 1. 6 times 1 plus 2, that's going to equal y. So negative 3 times negative 1 squared is 1, and that's a negative 1 there too. 6 times negative 1 is negative 6 plus 2, that equals y. So we'll get negative 3 plus negative 6 plus 2. When I add those up correctly using my rules of integers, I should get negative 7 equals y. Okay, I'm going to go back up to my table. My input value was negative 1. My output was negative 7. So I'm going to put that right here. Now I'm going to substitute in 0. I'm going to go back down here to my work. Negative 3 times 0 squared plus 6 times 0 plus 2 equals y. So 0 times anything is 0. 0 times anything is 0 plus 2. So this is an easy one. When x is 0, y is 2. So I'm going to go back to my table and plug in a 2 there. All right, I have to do this 2 more times for 2 and 3. All right, negative 3 times 2 squared plus 6 times 2 plus 2 equals y. So I'll get negative 3 times 4 plus 12 plus 2 equals y. So I'll get negative 12 plus 2 equals y. And it looks like my 12s are going to cancel out here because negative 12 plus 12 is 0. So 2 equals y. So I'm going to put that back in my table. So my input was 2, my output was negative 2. And I have one more value to do, 3. I go back to my workstation here. And I'm going to write negative 3 times 3 squared plus 6 times 3 plus 2 equals y. So I'll get negative 3 times 9 plus 18 plus 2 equals y. All right, so I'll get negative 27 plus 18 plus 2 equals y. And when I add those values up, I should get negative 7 is y. I'm going to go back to my table, scroll through all my work. I'm going to write in a negative 7. So here's my table. Fortunately, ladies and gentlemen, there is no shortcut for graphing quadratics, so I will always have to show all of this work. Okay, now that we went through all the work of putting together the XY table, now it's time to plot the points. So you can see in the graph here, I just took my XY table and I plotted the ordered pairs. So the first ordered pair is negative 1, negative 7. So I went to the left 1 and down 7. 0, 2, so on and so forth. You can see how they're plotted. If you see that any of the points are off just a little bit, it's because it's really hard to graph on this iPad. Okay, once you have the points plotted, now you need to connect the points in a U-shaped curve. All right, I kind of missed that one point there, and there's my other point. So this is how you would graph a quadratic. So at the beginning, we said that this graph was going to open down, so you can see that it opens down. Here are a few other things that you need to know. The line passing through the vertex is what divides the parabola into two symmetries, or two sections. So if I switch colors here, you'll see that the line that goes straight up and down right here is my line of symmetry. And we said in an earlier slide that the equation was going to be x equals 1. So this is a vertical line that goes through the parabola. Had I connected the points perfectly, you should see that the left side, if I fold it in half, would match up perfectly on top of the right side. Hopefully you also see that you can see some kind of symmetry happening in the table here. 5 is the middle, and then you can see that we got 2 on the outside and then -7 right above that. So you can see the symmetry happening in the table as well. All right, the vertex is either going to be the highest or the lowest point. So my vertex is right here. So that's my vertex. Okay, that's going to be the highest point if it opens down, and it's going to be your lowest point if the parabola opens up. And the last thing we need to talk about is the line of symmetry, which we already did. The line of symmetry is going to divide the parabola into two symmetric parts that are mirror images to each other. So this very long process is how you graph a quadratic equation. So remember, it's always going to graph into the shape of a parabola, and you're not going to use a ruler to graph this. So you need to make sure it's a U-shaped curve, not a V. And make sure you show all your work in your table. If you set up your X and Y values correctly in the table, you'll see the symmetry, and you'll see how the points graph into a parabola.